Futurama comic, issue 41. Predictably, when Bender is making a graduation speech, he's just wearing someone else's clothes and holding his college degree in his apartment, and he lies to him that he's just a hallucination to escape with a degree. Fry doesn't care that he's degree stealing to sell them to rich slacker college kids on Earth. Amy says it's great the crew volunteered as counselors for sorority's annual summer camp for kids. That dialogue's too stilted because of all the exposition they'd already know. Farnsworth says that by volunteer, she means waive admission costs so Hubert and Dwight can participate. And Amy's smart enough to think there'd be consequences if the other kids found out they got in for free. Wouldn't most of them not care? I mean, it's their parents that paid for it, not them. He's told the boys are covered and he still wants to fire Zoidberg. Then what took so long? She says they should wait until the camp is over, which is merciful. Especially since he thinks these kids have gills and he's their swimming instructor. I guess they think his lobster claws are just that useful that they shouldn't fire him. Amy tells her crew their assignment, with Farnsworth's being impossible. And it turns out Zap is here for the army training simulation. Leela thinks this activity will get the kids killed and doesn't want the boys to sign up for it. But Hermes tells her to let them play because he apparently completely trusts Zap. It turns out Zap wasn't talking about her, but his sub. And he pretends he hasn't even met her, which offends her. And Amy's upset that Kip is acting like he doesn't know her either. Wait, are they just simulations? It's an army training simulation after all. Or clones. Leela explains that she doesn't want Zap because he's foul, rude, and has no concept of romance. And she wasted all night saying she doesn't want to date Zap, as if she thinks they won't believe her otherwise. So Fry didn't get any sleep. How is he the only one who's sleepy? Bender says he heard his frat brothers at a sorority are tarnishing his frat's legacy by doing good deeds around campus. So he leaves, as I wonder why Zap's playing hard to get is actually working on Leela. Maybe it's because it makes her insecure because of her bullied childhood, which could have caused a part of her to appreciate Zap admiring her so much because nobody else but Fry does, and that gave her better self-worth. Bender sees robots collecting garbage and gets told that they stopped doing pranks long ago, and one of them knows they've been reprogrammed thanks to the Dean, but is fine with being the victim of that himself. Apparently that was part of the reprogramming. So they don't even remember how to pull a prank and aren't allowed to graduate until they've made up for the trouble they've caused. So Bender's gonna ruin everything by re-educating them. Why am I supposed to like his subplot? Zap tells the kids how to fire a warning shot, and Hubert wonders why they'd need to fire 15 of them. He explains that's because killing his enemy is the last thing he wants to do because he has somewhat trained soldiers who are poorly paid to do that. He tells them to start training with rifles, and Dwight says they got to simulate fighting in a hot zone. And Hubert says it's almost as if they're being prepared to fight in a real battle. So that means they are, because this is a work of fiction. Zap says that soon they'll be ready for deployment. He's told to remember to have a drink himself. Oh, so the drinks are evil. He's not suspicious though and gives the kids energy drinks. Zap acts like he doesn't recognize her voice and thinks she's a kitchen help here for the tray. Then Hubert and Dwight obviously talk like they've been hypnotized, but somehow she didn't hear them and notice. I hope she got suspicious when all of the kids walked away in a line. They're being controlled with the remote. She'd have to be as dumb as Fry to not figure things out here. After Bender's subplot that he can't stand where he wastes time, Bender sends the robots to try to prank Fry and one of them gets sent falling by him. Bender says the plastic wrap in the toilet seat trick never fails, and it's Farnsworth who showed up there and it took an hour and the robots fell asleep. So because Bender's pranks are thankfully failing, he's gonna steal all of Zap's money and valuables he was dumb enough to bring to feel better. So his bad habits are probably gonna save the day here by causing him to find out his evil plan. He hears Nixon say that the kids are gonna ship out tomorrow afternoon. He wants to do this with his soldiers from now on, and talks as if he hasn't already had the kids drink brainwashing lemonade. And he wants to start wars on every planet in the galaxy. I guess to get their land and resources, but he doesn't say. And he's having dinner with Kim Jong, and conveniently neither of them hear Bender talk to himself right in front of them, so he gets to warn Leela. Fry somehow forgets who Hubert and Dwight are, and Zoidberg stretches to have an insult for Dwight because Dwight doesn't have a personality. Leela says she'll have to go alone then, and Farnsworth offers her a healthy breakfast of giant bananas that his star pupil created to feed his albino shouting gorillas. That reminds me of the albino nuclear gorillas he made to proclaim his love for Mom. Leela rushes over to Nixon calling him out, and he's menacing because his jar's on top of a giant mech all of a sudden. Probably for protection in case someone found out his plan. He tells his guards to take her and lock her up in Zap's cabin. It's almost like she made a stupid mistake rushing over there with no plan or weapons. Fry goes past Bender when he's reading a magazine, and he's sad because the big virtual Blurns ball game was cancelled so the army could take the boys on a field trip. So Bender says he'll be at a pub drinking until he can think of someone else to save the day, because it looks hopeless. Zap says he forgot his lucky girdle and wants to run back to his cabin to get it. Then he sees Leela there and somehow assumes she tied herself to the chair. She says that Nixon's brainwashed him into sending those kids off to war. I don't know, I wouldn't put anything past him at this point. But brainwashing would explain why he doesn't remember her and keeps being rude to her. So she thinks she has to shock some sense into him by kissing him. And worse. So 3 minutes later, he says he'd never train kids for certain deaths. Just telemarketers and mimes. And she has to wear a tent-like dress because she thinks she can't fight evil in her current outfit. He confronts the kids and is congratulated, and eventually a noise comes out of the mecha and the kids aim for Leela and Zap, and Leela thinks that a high-frequency signal is controlling the boys. They're forced to get onto his ship with Bender and fly them into battle at gunpoint for a war with warmongers. The engine doesn't start because Bender's robots put a giant banana in the tailpipe as a prank. Kid's back to normal too because of Amy and tries to arrest Nixon for treason. I guess he'll still be in charge in all of the later issues though. Like the writers are too lazy to come up with new villains most of the time, so it's just another universe from the rest of the issues. Amy's impressed, and Nixon wonders where all those battle bots came from, and it turns out they came from Mom because she's randomly here as a camp counselor to force orphans to build robots in case someone might need them. How is she able to teach them all how to do that? Nixon complains that those robots could have solved all of his military recruitment problems. He should have thought of that. She says that for the right price, she could continue working the orphans 20 hours a day to meet his needs. And the two of them walk away together, getting away with everything, which is annoying. This story could have taken place on another planet with another president. The story ends with Kit saying that the kids will be back to normal in a few days. Futurama comic issue 42. Bender has a lot of dull narration while he's sleeping on the couch. He's been causing a lot of trouble. Hermie says they shouldn't believe him, and then Fry screams no because his fossilized dog got stolen. Maybe he didn't return it to normal because he's still apparently on that "oh, the dog totally won't appreciate me" idea. And he knows that Bender would never stop being a whiny crybaby about the attention he'd be giving the dog and would kick it. So he didn't trust Bender to keep his word. It's so depressing that he doesn't get to have his dog back. Somehow, he blames Leela for this for no reason instead of Bender. Zoidberg calls him over to him because he found a footprint and somehow doesn't know what it's called. Of course, Farnsworth can somehow analyze the footprint. He got the idea for that machine when he got his hand stuck in a toaster. Somehow the pain inspired him to think up a new invention. He finds a substance in the footprint belonging to a certain planet, and I wish he wasn't written to say there's only a 1 in 10 million chance a dog's there, because it makes it more contrived that it will be. Because that's their only lead, they decide to go to the planet with a ship. Leela reassures him that he might see Seymour again because Sirius is the dog star, even though it's only the dog star from the perspective of Earthlings. They get threatened by angry dogs, and Leela uses her wrist thing to send a message to the natives saying who she is and that she comes here in peace. And she's told that somehow the angry dogs are a welcoming party, who attack Bender, which is well deserved. Because of what Bender says in despair, while he's somehow not bothering to fight back, Leela throws bones to get the dogs to leave. The dogs have to have really tough alien teeth if they can tear Bender apart. The dogs have to be such aliens that they can talk. But they make it less believable when they say that's because they're specially trained. It takes advantage of them being dogs because they attacked from force of habit because they saw the delivery ship and thought they were mailmen. They were sent to find them, and when Fry says he's the delivery boy, he gets chased, and then apologized to. He pets one of the dogs, who thanks him for the belly rub. They're brought to a house, and the dogs don't see themselves as slaves despite calling their leader Rex their master. When one of the dogs merely says birds, the dogs run away hoping to find some birds. There's some obvious foreshadowing that the leader is a dog, and it turns out he is, which somehow makes Fry fly backwards, and somehow the leader isn't offended at Bender's angry reaction hitting the floor that the entire planet's ruled by dogs, called Canaanites. The crew gets invited somewhere for a feast, and the leader saying dinner gets all the dogs to run over to the dinner table, where Bender and Fry love the food. Even I can assume that Chihuahua is saying he wants Burger King. Fry says he wants his dog Seymour back and gets glared at and told to go for a walk. And this time the dogs don't go crazy somehow. A few of the dogs are clearly based on Homer's dog with the overly long name. They're here to make sure the crew's worthy of entering the temple by sniffing them. I like that Bender didn't get to go in. The people built this temple to please Seymour because he was somehow able to contact them from a distant planet. Predictably, the leader's evil and won't let him get his dog back. For no reason, Leela says roll over without meaning to, and the dogs roll over. After wasted time, they break into the temple thanks to Bender, and alarms go off and they run over to the ship and it takes off. Leela needs to use the universal translator she just discovered she always had right in front of her to understand the loud noise. Somehow Seymour's telling the Canaanites he never met to invade the Earth. Sap's looking over at the Canaanite ship and gets told that the sleeper cells on Earth have dug up all of their underground missile silos, and the computer network hubs that the army disguised as fire hydrants of all things have been made useless. So just like that, Zap surrenders. That was easy. Won't you have soldiers and spaceships with weapons? Eventually, Farnsworth figures out that Seymour isn't shrieking. A super intelligent flea on him with a microphone is, in an attempt to take over the world. He's genetically altered, making it even more confusing that he exists. And he's been sending high-frequency signals to the fleas on the back of the dog soldiers to make them invade. Farnsworth says the reason he knows so much about the fleas is that he's one of the world's geno-entomologists apparently, on top of being an engineer, and even has a world domination flea circus with a hole in the netting. If he really wanted to take over the world, he'd have done it by now. Zoidberg offers them some flea powder from under the table, and Farnsworth says a flea bath with it would work, and Fry talks into a radio that sounds like Seymour's voice to the dogs. I hope, or this is dumb. He tells the dogs it's bath time and a huge amount of flea powder gets poured on them, and conveniently, the Canaanites don't want Seymour anymore despite their loyalty to him because they appreciate Fry's loyalty to it. And realistically, they don't want a dog that'd make them bathe anyways. So they decide to go home and the story ends with Leela saying he's in stage 6 acceptance, which makes no sense because he got his dog back. This story was about the crew going to camp as counselors, for some unexplained reason, instead of making Farnsworth money delivering stuff, just because he wants Dwight and Kubert to be recruited for free. But I don't think he's saved enough money from that. And Dwight and Kubert get recruited as soldiers for an interplanetary war after being brainwashed by Lemonade. But the way they talk like they're hypnotized is nothing like how Zap's been acting or Kit's been acting. So how could they have been brainwashed by the exact same thing as the boys? I guess they were brainwashed by a different thing. This was a depressing story, both because of what was happening to Kubert and because Bender was training some robots at college to go back to being pranksters. But eventually, Bender's evil plan ends up being worth it because the pranksters put a giant banana of Farnsworth's in the tailpipe of the engine that was keeping the spaceship Leela and the boys were trapped in from flying. And then Mom shows up out of nowhere saying that she made some battle robots, and makes a deal with Nixon to give him some to solve his war recruitment problem. Which at least means he won't bother kids with his Nixonocide anymore. That's not a very easy to pronounce name. It was so annoying that they just walked away unharmed and unpunished, when she could have easily not had kids make the robots. Couldn't she make robots make the robots? This was a depressing story, even if I liked how much it took advantage of the dog aliens being dogs. I just hate that the story brought back the dog fossil. It just rubbed it in that Fry's never gonna get his dog back, not because it's impossible, but because he somehow convinced himself that the dog wouldn't care about him anymore. And somehow nobody around him thought that was stupid. The story has a super intelligent flea on the fossil use a small radio to take command of a bunch of dog aliens to try to take over the Earth for him, which sounds ridiculous just from typing about it. If the flea was made by Farnsworth to try to take over the world for him, it's confusing that Farnsworth let the flea have free will. And after the crew went to the dog planet that took great advantage of the people being dogs to try to get Seymour back, eventually the planet was invaded way too easily. But Fry saves the day when Zoidberg finds flea powder and he uses the radio to tell the dogs it's time for a flea bath, which causes them to decide they don't want the fossil anymore, even though they looked happy about the bath just because they were told to have it, somehow.